Coffee, the drink we all love. It provides people with their much needed energy in the morning. We drink it while working, walking, socialising, and even watching our favourite YouTube channels. But coffee is not just a drink, it's the spark of revolution, wealth and slavery. More than 200 million people grow coffee as a means of economic survival. Only 20% of all coffee grown is in large coffee plantations. The other 80% is from small family-owned farms. This shows how much some families rely on a seemingly simple crop. But why can coffee only be grown in certain places? Well, coffee's two main factors in growth are its temperature and humidity. A coffee plant's ideal temperature is between 18 to 24 degrees Celsius and around 70% humidity for ideal growth. This environment which coffee grows in is known as the bean belt. The bean belt is tucked between the tropics of Cancer and the tropics of Capricorn, and the bean belt consists of Hawaii, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Panama, Peru, Brazil, Colombia, Rwanda, Uganda, Kenya, Yemen, Ethiopia, Sumatra, Java, India, China, Papua New Guinea, Australia and Vietnam. All of these places have the correct factors for coffee growth. So how did coffee become the drink we all love today? Coffee grown worldwide can be traced back to the 9th century to the ancient rainforest on the Ethiopian plateau called Kaffa. As the story goes, coffee was discovered by a goat herder called Kaldi. When his goats ate the plant, they started dancing, so then he too tried the plant and then he too started dancing. What he ate was coffee beans, and the species of coffee he ate was Arabica. By the 15th century, coffee left Ethiopia and landed in the port city of Mocha, Yemen. Yemen was the first documented place to roast coffee beans to unlock their full flavour. The Sufis were one of the first people to notice drinking coffee helped to keep you awake. This made it an ideal drink for late night prayers. By the end of the 15th century, coffee was known in Egypt, Syria and Turkey. The most coffee-mad cities were Mecca, Cairo and Constantinople. Coffee became so popular in the Islamic world because it allowed Muslim people to meet in cafes and socialise. As they did not drink alcohol, there were no pubs like there were in Europe. In cafes, people talked business, royalty and politics. However, in 1511, coffee was banned in Mecca. Then in the mid-16th century, it was banned in Constantinople after leaders learned that people were educating themselves in cafes about politics, which did not help their rule. European travellers from the East brought back stories of an unusual black beverage. Some people reacted to the new beverage with suspicion or fear, calling it the bitter invention of Satan. But we all know now that this is the real bitter invention of Satan. The Viennese, Dutch and Italians were the first to import coffee to Europe in the 17th century. However, England was the first place to have a cafe. It was opened in London in 1652. By 1701, there was over 2,000 cafes in London alone. Cafes were often called penny universities. This was because for the price of a penny, you could get a coffee and sit and listen to some of the brightest people talk. Cafes were filled with controversy because again, in 1675, King Charles II tried to ban cafes as people started to discuss politics. However, with a large uproar, he quickly changed his mind. Back to Venice, in 1615, the local clerk condemned coffee when it first arrived. The controversy was so great that the Pope was asked to intervene and taste the coffee. He tried it, loved it and approved it. In 1669, a Turkish ambassador introduced coffee into Paris, and the French hated it. However, they noticed it helped to move the bowels. Then French doctors started to prescribe coffee and enemas. The French view slowly started to change towards coffee, and in 1689 the first cafe was opened in Paris, and thousands sprung up after. However, in July 1789, Camille Desmoulins gave a speech from a cafe table and got the crowd riled up. Days later, the same people sieged the Bastille, and this is where the French Revolution began. In the mid-17th century, the Dutch began to grow coffee on both the island of Java and the island of Sumatra. This was due to the rising demand of coffee across Europe. They grew the coffee by enslaving the local population. The Viennese then created kombucha. This was adding milk and sugar to coffee, which is known as a cappuccino today. Okay, forwarding in time. In 1869, the British coffee plants in Sri Lanka had caught a fungal infection which affected the plant's leaves. Soon after, the infection had spread across nearly the whole of Asia, affecting most of the coffee plantations. They were then forced to grow tea instead, as it was still a profitable plant. Which we seen in the last video, this is one of the reasons Britain turned into crazy tea drinkers. The Europeans then started searching for other species of coffee, which was resistant to this type of disease. They managed to find one in Central Africa called Robusta. They soon learned that the only problem with Robusta was it was disgusting and it had to be mixed with Arabica. Okay, let's go back in time. In 1714, the Mayor of Amsterdam presented a gift of a young coffee plant to King Louis XIV of France. The king ordered it to be planted in the Royal Botanic Gardens in Paris. Then, in 1720, a French man named Gabriel Cléot brought a coffee plant to Martinique. However, he had his problems. Whilst on the voyage, he was attacked off pirates, hit with heavy storms, and then faced drought. Despite this, he rationed his water and shared it with the coffee plant. Once planted, the seedling not only thrived, but it is now credited with the spread of over 15 million coffee trees on the island in just 50 years. Even more incredible is that the seedling is thought to be the parent of nearly every coffee tree throughout the Caribbean, Central and South America. However, the famous Brazilian coffee owes its existence to a Brazilian man called Francesco Platy. He was sent by the emperor to French islands to collect coffee seeds. The French were not willing to share them, but a French governor's wife, captured by his good looks, gave him a large bouquet of flowers before he left. Buried within them were coffee seeds. These seeds were what began today's billion-dollar industry. The Caribbean islands were used to grow coffee plants. However, these plants were not harvested by the Europeans, but by thousands of African slaves. Then, in 1789, the island of Saint-Domingue, which was part of a French colony, saw a rebellion of slaves demanding their freedom, which is now known as the Haiti Revolution today, which was inspired by the French Revolution, resulting in the nation of Haiti in 1804. In the first half of the 19th century, nearly 1.5 million African slaves were shipped to Brazil to begin work on coffee plantations. This then led Brazil to keep slavery until 1888, as the coffee plantations made Brazilian farmers very wealthy and they did not want to give up their fortune very easily. Brazil then produced so much coffee that it overtook demand, and thus dropping the price of coffee, making it affordable for the working class people. After Central America seeing the success of coffee plantations in Brazil, they began to follow the path. Guatemala had fertile lands which was ideal for coffee growth, but there was only one problem. These lands were inhabited by indigenous tribes. However, rich Guatemalans took over these lands, begun to build coffee plantations. They then forced the indigenous people to work on the farms. Guatemala isn't the only country to do this. It's happened in Honduras, Nicaragua, El Salvador and Brazil. In 1906, a man called Sirius Blanc and George Washington, a Belgian guy, made refined coffee on mass scale. They became the first people to do so. However, it is important to note that these were not the people to invent refined coffee. It was a guy called Alfonso Allais. Then, in 1918, the US Army bought George Washington's full supply of instant coffee as it was so popular during the war. The US were now brewing around 40 million cups per day at the end of the war. This is what is thought to have started the coffee craze in America. George Washington was not the lead instant coffee salesman for long, because in 1938 Nestle, being the great company they are with no problems at all, launched a new instant coffee drink called Nescafé, which is still sold to this day. Instant coffee tasted so bad that it did not matter what seeds you used. So Nestle used Robusta seeds from Central Africa instead of the nicer tasting Arabica seeds. This made the product cheaper and a greater alternative after the Second World War, as people did not have as much disposable income. Fast forward to now, and there has not been any major development. However, coffee production varies in many places, but some countries still depend on the trade. 33% or a third of all coffee production is from Brazil, then Vietnam with 17%, Colombia with 8%, Indonesia with 6%, both Ethiopia and Honduras with 4%, and then India with 3%. The rest of coffee production is scattered across the world. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to comment, like and subscribe.